Well, I gotta say, as far as penultimate episodes go, the one for The Flash was a lot of fun. I'm not gonna lie. Now, there were a few issues with it regarding the narrative and how I think it could have been improved, but for the most part, I really enjoyed myself while watching this. Granted, I normally enjoy myself while watching episodes of The Flash, but this one in particular had a very interesting story in that the gang back at Star Labs see that the accelerator is being charged up by some unknown device that Dr. Wells planted there. They don't know how to shut it down, and they figure, well, if it goes off, they question Cisco. If that thing goes off again, what's going to happen to the metahumans that are locked up down there? And he says, oh, they'll be toasted. So Barry says, okay, well, we need to move him. We're going to move him to Lian the Argus prison on Lian that Oliver told me about. And this opens up a variety of discussions between him and Joe, where Joe basically says, at what point of breaking the law and not playing by the rules do we become just as bad as these metahumans? So there are a lot of very very reasonable conversations that these two characters have, Barry and Joe, and I actually thought it was pretty appropriate for the scenario, because Joe says, in the past year I've broken the law several times, and this is unlawful imprisonment, and it never really comes off as preachy. It comes across as legitimate concern. However, where this episode really became much more interesting is when, since all of the options have thus far failed, Barry reaches out to Leonard Snart, aka Captain Cold, and I say, yes, because like I've said before, he is honestly one of the best villains on the show. The best is Reverse Flash, but Captain Cold's a close second, because Wentworth Miller and gang, Dominic Purcell and Peyton List, they look like they are having a blast playing these characters. And on top of that, I just like the way that Snart is written, and he is written very consistently here. So Barry reaches out to him and says, if you do this for us, if you help us move these guys through the city, then A, there will still be a city for you to rob banks in, and B, he reluctantly agrees to erase any record of Leonard Snart from the police database. So Snart agrees. He brings along his sister, the Golden Glider, and a reluctant partnership is formed. But things go awry, of course. Snart twists the situation to benefit himself, and chaos ensues. While at the same time, actually no, I'll get to that later. First of all, I love this twist, and I love it because A, again, it's very in character for Leonard Snart, and B, it really turns this whole alliance on its head, because you're up until that point you're thinking, okay, well they are reluctantly teaming up. Hero and villain are reluctantly teaming up because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, or they have common goals. Okay, so they could have easily just gone for a straightforward story like that, but in having Leonard Snart twist the situation to his own advantage, opens up a whole bunch of interesting new territory, because he says, okay, now these people owe me a favor, so I think they'll be much more useful as part of my rogues gallery than in your Lian prison. Oh, and good luck with all whatever this is, the stuff with the Reverse Flash. So yeah, Barry thinking that he is tricking Captain Cold, thinking that he can use him, when in reality Captain Cold, being much more experienced and much more devious, plays him like a fiddle. So again, very, very interesting lesson for Barry. And so that whole plot line I thought was very good. In fact, there wasn't a whole lot of bad in this episode. They find Eddie. He basically distances himself from Iris again, which I'll admit is getting kind of tiring. But for the most part, they do bring up some legitimate points. Each of them do. Iris says, just because some lunatics showed you a newspaper from the future does not mean that we cannot be in a relationship. I mean, you're really going to go by that just because of that? The future is not set in stone. And he says, that was just the final nail in the coffin. I mean, I've seen the way you two look at each other. So again, I wish they would not dwell on this romance so much. I wish they would not do this constant back and forth as much as they do. Really on both shows, as a matter of fact, Arrow and The Flash. But with that being said, it's not like they do it poorly, or at least most of the time they do it reasonably well. I'm just saying I wish they wouldn't do it as often, this creative team. So basically the entire plot involving Captain Cold and the prisoner transport I thought was very much enough to fit one episode. I thought the plot really not wrapped itself up, but I thought it concluded itself in a nice climactic way. There was a pretty fun fight where the villains escape. Captain Cold again pulls the trigger when it needs to be pulled. He again twists the scenario. He sabotages the transport truck, and yeah, I thought that was enough to fit one episode. And then on the DVR I saw, wait a minute, this thing has still got like 10 minutes left, like 10-15 minutes left. How? Because this is the point. This is usually the point. Like, right when Joe is talking to Barry, saying like, "I did tell you so," and Barry is really having this heart to heart and thinking, I thought I could use Snart, but really he used me. At that point, I expected they would end the episode, but then the episode still had a few minutes left, and I'm thinking, wait, what? And then Dr. Wells shows up at Star Labs, and they kick into this fight. Fire. You've seen it in all the promos. Firestorm comes down from the sky. Ronnie comes down, and Oliver comes down in full League of Assassin getup, and I'm thinking, okay, so this might be where they have a cliffhanger. They start. It's looking like they're going to fight, and then they're going to end the episode. But then, once again, the episode still had like 5 minutes left, and I'm thinking, okay, so are they going to actually start the fight? And sure enough, they incapacitate Wells. There's this big climactic fight. It's very well done. Very, very on the edge of your seat action. Even the CGI is done well. And each of the characters gets a few good hits in on Dr. Wells, and you believe, given what this guy has been capable of throughout the entire show, you believe that it takes all three of them to bring him down, and once they finally do, it's very satisfying. It's handled very well. But I'm thinking, did we just see a segment from another episode? Because this whole fight seemed completely separate from what we'd seen up to this point, and there was little to no setup to it. The episode wasn't building around Dr. Wells. The episode was building around the prisoner transport and Captain Cold's betrayal. Okay, that was a fairly self-contained story, and then throwing this Dr. Wells fight in at the end really seemed out of left field, and that was really my biggest issue, is that this whole end fight, as good as it was, and as much as I enjoyed myself, retroactively I'm kind of thinking it didn't really connect all that well to the rest of the episode in terms of which characters were utilized and in terms of how the story progressed. Because Firestorm, Ronnie Raymond, there was no mention of him until this point, where he just showed up out of nowhere and he's like, hi. And Oliver, they mention one or two times, like Barry says, Oliver has this island, Lee and you, or I reached out to Oliver, and I thought I could be Oliver. And so at least they mention him, but again, it's a little confusing because when is this episode supposed to take place? Presumably during Oliver's time with the League of Assassins, but I don't know. And again, it would have helped if they had given a little bit of context. But yeah, that was really my biggest episode. By itself, the plot involving the prisoner transport, basically the first 35 to 40 minutes of the episode worked extremely well in its own context, and then the end fight end fight, the last 5-10 minutes of the episode worked extremely well on its own, but this episode mushed them together. So I'm thinking, so they really don't mesh, and that was the biggest issue. But aside from that, I did have a good time. The performances are still they still draw me in. I really liked a lot of the guest stars. Again, Wentworth Miller, Peyton List, and even some of the what can honestly be called cameos, because they didn't really get a whole lot to do, like Liam McIntyre and Doug Jones and the other metahumans. So yeah, I liked a lot of this episode. I like some of the issues that it brought up, going outside the law and whatever. But again, I just wish it hadn't just gone completely in a different direction in the last 5-10 minutes. I think this episode would have been stronger if they padded it out. But again, you get where I'm coming from. So that's about all I got. As always, like, subscribe, or comment. Tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, is the season finale of Arrow. So until then,